My name is Anna, and I am 36 years old. If you had asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have told you I was one of the luckiest women alive. I had a loving husband named Daniel, a man I believed was my soulmate, and a best friend named Sarah, who had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. Sarah wasn't just a friend to me, she was family. We had grown up side by side, sharing every milestone, every heartbreak, every dream. People often joked that we were more like sisters than friends. In many ways, I believed that too. Sarah was the one who held my hand through my first heartbreak in high school, the one who cried with me when my mother passed away, and the one who stood by my side as maid of honor on my wedding day. She was always there, a constant presence in my life, and I thought there was nothing that could ever come between us. And then there was Daniel. He was charming, supportive, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. When I introduced him to Sarah, I remember feeling relieved that the two most important people in my world got along so well. They laughed together, shared stories, and even developed their own inside jokes. At the time, I thought it was a blessing. I thought it meant my life was balanced, that I didn't have to choose between the man I loved and the friend I cherished. I thought I had it all. Our lives intertwined so naturally. Sarah would come over for dinner once a week, sometimes even more. She knew Daniel almost as well as I did, and they often teamed up to tease me about my quirks, like how I needed my morning coffee just so, or how I always left the closet light on. I would laugh along with them, never questioning the bond they shared. Why would I? I trusted them both with my whole heart. At that time, I was working as an event planner, a career that demanded long hours, but also gave me a sense of purpose. Daniel was an architect, always busy with blueprints and deadlines, and Sarah was a nurse who often worked late shifts at the hospital. Despite our demanding schedules, we always made time for each other. We had a rhythm, a sense of stability that I thought was unshakable. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there even then, tiny moments that seemed meaningless at the time, but, in hindsight, were cracks in the foundation of my so-called perfect life. The way Sarah's eyes lingered on Daniel a second too long when he told a funny story, or how Daniel would smile at his phone when a text came in late at night, brushing it off as work-related. At the time, I ignored these moments, brushing away the unease that tugged at the corners of my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into things. After all, Sarah was my best friend, my sister in everything but blood. And Daniel was my husband, the man who promised to love me forever. I wanted so badly to believe in the life I had built, in the people I trusted the most, that I silenced the small voice inside me that whispered something wasn't right. I see it all so clearly now. But back then, I was blind to the storm that was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and friendship. If you are listening to this story, I want you to know that betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are inflicted by the very people you would have defended with your life. And that is where my story begins, with a woman who believed she had it all, only to discover that the two people she trusted most were the ones holding the knife behind her back. For a long time, everything seemed normal, or at least I convinced myself it was. But as the months passed, little things began to catch my attention, things I could no longer ignore. It started with Sarah showing up at my house more often than usual. At first, it felt natural. She had always been welcome in our home. She would drop by after her shifts at the hospital, claiming she was too tired to cook and wanted to share dinner with us. Daniel, ever the gracious host, would insist she stay, even when I suggested she might need rest. I thought it was sweet, at first, that he cared so much about my best friend. But then, I began to notice how comfortable Sarah seemed, how she knew exactly where everything was in the kitchen, how she would grab a beer from the fridge without asking, how she would sink into the couch next to Daniel as though she belonged there. At first I brushed it off. Sarah was family. Of course she felt at home. But then there were the private conversations. I'd walk into the room and the two of them would stop talking suddenly, exchanging quick glances before changing the subject. I laughed it off nervously, telling myself I was imagining things. After all, what could they possibly be hiding from me? Then came the late-night messages. I noticed that Daniel's phone would buzz at odd hours, long after I'd gone to bed. He claimed it was work, clients who lived in different time zones, urgent updates from his team. Sometimes I believed him, but other times, when I woke up unexpectedly, I would see the faint glow of his phone screen under the covers, his fingers typing quickly before he locked the screen and pretended to be asleep. One night, curiosity got the better of me. When Daniel went to shower, he left his phone on the nightstand. I told myself I wasn't going to look. I told myself I trusted him. But something inside me, the unease that had been growing for weeks, pushed me forward. My hands trembled as I picked up his phone, but just as I unlocked the screen, the bathroom door opened and Daniel walked back in. He saw me holding it and froze for a moment before forcing a smile. "Looking for the time?" he asked casually, but his eyes betrayed something darker. I quickly set the phone down and laughed nervously, muttering an excuse. He didn't say anything more, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew exactly what I had been about to do. Around the same time, Sarah's behavior began to change too. She used to confide in me about everything, her struggles at work, her dating disasters, her dreams of starting her own clinic someday. But now, she seemed distant, guarded. She dodged questions, gave vague answers, and sometimes even avoided eye contact when I asked where she had been. And yet, when she was with Daniel, she seemed more alive than ever. Her laughter was louder, her eyes sparkled brighter, and she hung on to every word he said. One evening, during a dinner at our house, I watched them share a joke I wasn't part of. They both burst out laughing, while I sat there smiling weakly, feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. It was a small moment, but it cut me deeper than I expected. The more I noticed, the harder it became to silence the questions in my head. Why did Sarah suddenly have new clothes she couldn't afford on her nurse's salary? Why did Daniel start wearing cologne he hadn't touched in years? Why did they both seem to disappear on the same evenings with different excuses? I wanted to confront them, but every time I tried, fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if I was just being paranoid and ended up destroying the very relationships I cherished most? I told myself I needed proof. I needed to be certain before I accused my husband and my best friend of betraying me. And so I began to watch more closely. I started noting the times Sarah said she was working late and the nights Daniel said he had urgent projects. More often than not, their excuses lined up perfectly. Coincidence, I tried to tell myself. Just coincidence. But in my heart, I knew the truth was far more sinister. This was the beginning of my unraveling. The slow realization that my perfect world wasn't as perfect as I had believed. And though I still clung to the hope that I was wrong, deep down, I knew that the storm I had been ignoring was getting closer. The more I tried to push my suspicions aside, the louder they screamed inside my head. I kept telling myself that Sarah was my best friend, my sister, the one person who would never betray me. And Daniel, he was my husband. He had promised to love and protect me. They couldn't possibly be doing what my heart feared, but the little signs had piled up too high, and I could no longer ignore them. One Friday night, Daniel told me he had to stay late at the office to finish drawings for a big client. It wasn't unusual. His deadlines often stretched late into the evening. I nodded, kissed him goodbye, and wished him luck. He smiled, but it felt forced, his eyes avoiding mine. A couple of hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. She claimed she was exhausted from a double shift at the hospital and going straight home to bed. I texted her back quickly, wishing her good rest, but something didn't sit right. For years, Sarah had a habit of posting little things on social media whenever she got home, pictures of her cat or a glass of wine with the caption, "Finally relaxing." That night, her account was silent. I tried to brush it off, but unease spread through me like poison. I decided to drive past Daniel's office just to ease my mind. Maybe then I could finally let go of this paranoia. The streets were quiet, the city already sinking into weekend calm. When I pulled up outside Daniel's building, the parking lot was nearly empty. His car wasn't there. I froze, staring at the empty space where it should have been. My heart began to pound in my chest, my breath quickening. I told myself maybe he had parked somewhere else. Maybe he had left to grab food. But then another thought crept in, darker, undeniable. If he wasn't at work, then where was he? I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to decide what to do, until instinct guided me toward a part of town I rarely visited. There was a quiet restaurant tucked away in a side street, one Sarah and I had discovered years ago but had stopped visiting. I don't know why I ended up there, but as I pulled around the corner, I saw it. Daniel's car, parked in the shadows near the entrance. My stomach dropped. My hands shook as I parked a little way down the street. I told myself I wouldn't overreact, that maybe he had come here alone for a meal. But then the restaurant doors opened, and there they were. Daniel and Sarah, stepping out together, laughing softly, their faces lit by the glow of the streetlights. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. My breath caught in my throat and I couldn't move. They didn't see me. I watched as Daniel placed his hand on the small of Sarah's back, guiding her toward his car the same way he used to do with me. It was a small gesture, intimate and protective, but it was enough to confirm everything I had been trying so desperately to deny. I stayed frozen in my car, tears welling up in my eyes as I watched them drive away together. I didn't follow them. I couldn't. My body felt numb, my mind screaming with betrayal. The two people I trusted more than anyone in the world were sneaking behind my back, and now I had seen it with my own eyes. When I finally made it home, I collapsed onto the couch, my entire body trembling. I kept hearing Sarah's voice in my head, the same voice that had promised we would always be there for each other, the same voice that had told me she'd never do anything to hurt me. And Daniel, the man who vowed to stand by me for better or worse. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to confront them both immediately. But another part of me, colder, more calculating, held me back. If I exploded without proof, Daniel would deny it. Sarah would twist the truth. They would make me feel crazy. No, I needed more than a glimpse outside a restaurant. I needed undeniable evidence. That night, I made a decision. I would stop pretending everything was fine. I would watch, I would listen, and I would gather proof. Because if my best friend and my husband were betraying me, then I wasn't just going to sit back and let them destroy my life. I was going to uncover every single lie they had told me. And as I lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, I realized with icy clarity that the life I thought was safe and stable was already gone. All that was left was the truth, and the truth was only just beginning to reveal itself. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a completely different person. My head was pounding from lack of sleep, but it wasn't just exhaustion keeping me awake. It was the knowledge that something sacred in my life had already shattered. No matter how much I wanted to believe otherwise, I could no longer deny what I had seen the night before. Daniel and Sarah, together, laughing as if they were the ones sharing a secret life. But I still didn't have enough to confront them. Not really. They would just deny it, twist things, make me feel crazy. I knew Daniel well enough to understand how quickly he could shift blame, and Sarah. Sarah had always been good with words, turning situations around until she looked innocent. I wasn't going to give them that chance. I needed something undeniable. That morning, over breakfast, Daniel was unusually cheerful. He hummed as he buttered his toast, his phone lying face down on the table. He even kissed my forehead before leaving for work, something he hadn't done in weeks. I stared at him in silence, every gesture feeling like a performance. Did he really think I was that blind, that naive? As soon as he left, I began searching for answers. I started with his laptop. Normally, Daniel kept it with him, but he had left it on the desk in his home office. My hands shook as I opened it, half expecting a password lock, but to my surprise, it opened immediately. My heart hammered as I dug through his folders, his emails, anything that might reveal the truth. At first, there was nothing, just work files, client emails, drafts of architectural plans. But then, tucked inside a folder marked Invoices, I found something that made my stomach drop. A series of restaurant receipts, hotel reservations, and even gift shop purchases. They were all dated on nights when Daniel had claimed to be working late. My hands clenched around the printed receipts as I scrolled further, each one painting a clearer picture. He had been taking Sarah out, buying her things, even booking a hotel room just 3 weeks ago. Tears burned my eyes, but I forced myself to keep looking, I had to know the full extent of their betrayal. Next, I turned to Sarah. She had always trusted me with her spare house key in case of emergencies. That afternoon, while she was supposedly working another late shift, I drove to her apartment. My pulse raced as I slid the key into the lock, stepping into a place that suddenly felt foreign. Her apartment smelled faintly of Daniel's cologne, the same one he had only recently started wearing again. My throat tightened. I walked through the rooms, slowly, carefully, my eyes scanning every corner. At first, everything seemed normal. Her scrubs folded neatly on the chair, her cat asleep on the windowsill. But then I saw it. A sweater draped over the back of her couch. It was Daniel's, the same gray cashmere sweater I had bought him for Christmas last year. I picked it up with trembling hands, burying my face in the fabric, and there it was, his scent, undeniable. My knees nearly buckled. But the worst came when I opened her nightstand drawer. Inside was a small box. I pulled it out, not knowing what I would find, and when I opened it, my heart stopped. It was a bracelet, one I had admired in a store window weeks ago. I had pointed it out to Daniel, half joking, saying how pretty it was. He had shrugged and said maybe one day. But here it was, not on my wrist, but hidden in Sarah's drawer. I sat down heavily on the edge of her bed, the bracelet clutched in my hand, my chest heaving. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't paranoia. This was real. My best friend and my husband weren't just flirting or sneaking dinners. They were living a life behind my back, one filled with gifts, lies, and intimacy that used to belong to me. I left her apartment in a daze, my vision blurred with tears. When I got home, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my throat was raw. Every memory of Sarah's laughter, every promise Daniel had ever whispered, replayed in my mind like cruel taunts. But beneath the pain, something else began to grow. Anger. Cold, steady, unforgiving anger. They thought they were smarter than me. They thought I would never find out. But I wasn't going to sit quietly and let them keep destroying me. That night, when Daniel came home, I acted as though nothing had changed. I smiled. I asked him about his day. I even cooked his favorite meal. And as he sat across from me at the dinner table, talking casually about his project deadlines, I studied him like a stranger. I wondered how long it would take before he realized that I knew. The game had changed. I wasn't the naive wife anymore. I was a woman who had been betrayed, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it, and deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. By the time the weekend arrived, the anger inside me had grown into something unbearable. Every glance from Daniel, every casual text from Sarah felt like knives cutting deeper into my chest. I couldn't look at either of them without feeling the bile rise in my throat, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. At some point, I had to confront them. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Sarah called me on Saturday morning, her voice as cheerful as always. She suggested we get together for coffee, just the two of us, like old times. I agreed, my voice steady even though my heart pounded in my chest. We met at a small cafe near downtown, the same one where we had celebrated our birthdays, shared secrets about our first crushes, and comforted each other during breakups. Sitting across from her now, I barely recognized the woman smiling at me. She looked radiant, almost glowing, and I couldn't help but think it wasn't because of her job or a good night's sleep. It was because of Daniel. My Daniel. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching her with narrowed eyes. "You've been busy lately," I said casually. Sarah nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Work has been crazy. Double shifts overtime, you know how it is." I smiled faintly, though my stomach twisted. "Funny, Daniel's been working late too. Seems like you two always have the same schedule for a split second." Her smile faltered. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but I caught it. She quickly recovered, laughing softly. What can I say? I guess we're both workaholics. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Do you take him to the same hotel every time, or do you mix it up? Her face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, Sarah looked cornered. She set her cup down with a trembling hand, trying to mask it by brushing crumbs from the table. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered finally, but the guilt was written all over her face. I pulled my phone from my bag and slid it across the table. On the screen were photos of the receipts I had found, alongside a picture I had snapped of her wearing the bracelet Daniel had bought. Don't insult me by pretending. I know everything. Sarah stared at the screen, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment I thought she might apologize, might finally admit to what she had done. But instead she lifted her chin defiantly. You don't understand, Anna, she said coldly. Daniel and we didn't mean for this to happen. But it did. And maybe it was meant to. Her words sliced through me like a blade. Meant to? I repeated, my voice shaking. You were my best friend. My sister? And you're telling me that stabbing me in the back was fate? Her eyes hardened. You've always had everything, Anna. The house, the career, the perfect husband. You don't know what it's like to always be second best. Daniel sees me. He values me in ways you never let him. I sat there in stunned silence, her betrayal laid bare in front of me. It wasn't just about love or lust. It was about jealousy, about years of hidden resentment I had never noticed. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Without thinking, I answered, putting it on speaker. Hey, babe, his voice came through, smooth and casual. I'll be late tonight. Big project, you know how it is. Sarah froze, her face turning pale again. I smiled bitterly. Really? Because I'm sitting here with Sarah right now and she doesn't look like she's on her way to the hospital. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. Anna, Daniel began, but I cut him off. No, I snapped. Don't you dare lie to me again. I know everything, the dinners, the hotel, the bracelet, all of it. Another silence, heavier this time. Then finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low. Anna, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, my voice trembling but firm. The two people I trusted most have been betraying me for months, maybe longer. Do you even realize what you've done to me? He didn't answer. The silence told me all I needed to know. I ended the call and turned back to Sarah. She was shaking, her mask of confidence cracking. For the first time, she looked ashamed. But it was too late. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table for the untouched coffee. You can have him, I said coldly. Both of you deserve each other. But don't think for a second I'm going to let you destroy me. You've taken enough already. And with that, I walked out of the cafe, my legs weak but my head held high. My heart was shattered, but beneath the pain, I felt something new. Power. They thought I was blind, that I'd never find out. But now, the truth was out in the open. And this was only the beginning. When I left the cafe that day, the world around me felt both sharper and blurrier at the same time. The air was colder, the sounds of traffic harsher, the sunlight almost blinding. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't the same Anna who had walked in with trembling hands and silent suspicions. I had faced the truth, and though it broke me, it also set something free. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. They weren't going to stop lying, and they weren't going to admit their betrayal, unless forced to. Daniel and Sarah thought they had the upper hand, that I would crumble, stay quiet, maybe even forgive. But they were wrong. If they had underestimated me this much, then they didn't know me at all. When I got home, the house felt different. The walls that once comforted me now echoed with secrets and lies. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my wedding ring, the symbol of vows that had been broken long before I discovered the truth. Slowly, deliberately, I slid it off my finger and placed it on the table. My hand felt lighter, freer. I opened my laptop and began to research lawyers. Divorce wasn't just a thought anymore, it was a necessity. But I wasn't going to walk into it blind. Daniel was clever with money, and Sarah was manipulative. I needed evidence. Proof that couldn't be denied or twisted. If I was going to protect myself and everything I had worked for, I had to be strategic. Over the next few days, I began my quiet investigation. I collected every receipt I had found on Daniel's computer, every text message that hinted at late-night rendezvous, every subtle piece of evidence. I backed everything up on a hidden drive, far away from his reach. I also began paying closer attention at home. Daniel had grown careless, perhaps because he thought his lies were still working. One evening, while he showered, I scrolled through his phone and found photos, not of Sarah and him together, but of gifts, jewelry, dresses, even a bouquet of roses, items I had never received. Each photo was like a dagger, but also another weapon I could use. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to act as though nothing had changed. She still texted me casually, sent me memes, and asked about dinner plans. Every message made my skin crawl. I didn't respond much, but I saved everything. Screenshots of her words, timestamps that lined up perfectly with Daniel's work nights. At work, I forced myself to function, though inside I was crumbling. No one knew what I was going through. To my colleagues, I was still the reliable Anna, the one who managed every detail with precision. But when I came home, I would sit in the dark, staring at the walls, feeling both hollow and furious. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself looking through old photo albums, pictures of me, Sarah, and Daniel laughing together at birthdays, vacations, holidays. In every image, Sarah was there, always by my side, smiling as though she were part of the family. And in every picture, Daniel's arm was around me. But now I wondered, how long had his eyes been drifting toward her when I wasn't looking? I cried quietly, clutching one of the photos to my chest. But when the tears dried, the anger came back stronger. They had taken enough from me, my love, my trust, my peace. They weren't going to take my future, too. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Sitting across from her in a sleek office, I told her everything about the receipts, the bracelet, the lies. She listened carefully, her expression professional but sympathetic. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Anna," she said firmly, "you're in a stronger position than you think. If you gather enough evidence, we can ensure Daniel doesn't walk away from this unscathed. And as for Sarah, if she interferes, we'll handle that too." Her words were like oxygen. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone preparing for battle. When I got home that evening, Daniel greeted me with his usual kiss on the cheek, pretending everything was fine. I smiled back, hiding the storm inside me. If he noticed the faint coldness in my eyes, he didn't say anything. But I knew something he didn't. I knew that his world, the secret one he thought he could keep hidden, was about to come crashing down. Because I wasn't Anna, the naive wife, anymore. I was Anna, the fighter, and I was ready. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life, but they also awakened something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Control. Every day I played the role of the trusting wife, the loyal friend, while quietly collecting pieces of the puzzle that would eventually expose them both. It was exhausting, living a double life, but I reminded myself that I wasn't doing it to save them. I was doing it to save myself. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed oblivious. If anything, he grew bolder. He stayed out later, came home smelling faintly of Sarah's perfume, and offered explanations that were paper-thin. "Client dinner," he would say, tossing his jacket over the chair. "Late meeting," he'd mumble, avoiding my eyes. And Sarah, God, Sarah, she continued to play her part too. She sent me cheerful texts about work, sent me pictures of her cat sprawled on the couch, even asked if I wanted to go shopping with her next weekend. Every word was a knife twisting deeper, but I smiled through the pain, responding just enough to keep her unsuspecting. But while they thought I was still in the dark, I was preparing my first move. I started small. One evening, Daniel left his laptop open in the living room while he went to shower. I sat down, heart pounding, and opened his email. At first, it was just the usual, messages from clients, project updates, but then I found a folder tucked away in the drafts. It wasn't labeled, but inside were unsent emails. Letters to Sarah, some were short, just a sentence or two. I can't stop thinking about you. Others were longer, filled with confessions he had never spoken to me in years. I took screenshots of every single one, saving them to the hidden drive. Proof. Unshakable proof. But I didn't stop there. I installed a small voice recorder app on his phone when he wasn't looking, set to activate automatically whenever he made or received calls. It was risky, but within a week I had recordings of hushed late-night conversations. His voice soft and intimate in ways I hadn't heard in years. "I miss you already," he whispered one night. "I'll see you tomorrow." Hearing it nearly broke me, but it also fueled me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. They were guilty, and I had the evidence. My first strike came during a family dinner. We had invited Sarah, of course, because why wouldn't we? She was practically part of the household. I cooked her favorite dish, pretending nothing was wrong. Daniel laughed and poured wine. Sarah smiled across the table at him, and I watched them both, my rage simmering beneath the surface. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself and returned with my laptop. I set it on the table, opened the folder with the screenshots, and turned the screen so they could both see. The effect was immediate. Sarah's fork froze halfway to her mouth, her eyes widening as the words stared back at her. Daniel's face drained of color, his jaw tightening. "Anna," he started, but I raised my hand sharply. "Save it," I said coldly. "I'm done listening to lies. I just wanted to see your faces when you realized I know everything." The silence was suffocating. Sarah finally found her voice, stammering, It's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Don't insult me. You've been sneaking around behind my back for months. Do you think I'm blind?" Daniel tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled back. "Anna, please, let's talk about this privately." "Privately?" I snapped. "You gave up the right to privacy when you betrayed me with my best friend. Do you even hear yourselves? Do you realize how pathetic this is? Sneaking around like teenagers, lying to my face while smiling over dinner?" Sarah's cheeks flushed red, her composure cracking. "We didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "Of course you didn't," I spat. "Affairs are accidents, right? Just a slip, just a mistake, but you don't accidentally book hotels. You don't accidentally write love letters. You don't accidentally betray the person who trusted you most." Neither of them spoke. They just sat there, exposed, their perfect little illusion shattered. I stood up, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "This is only the beginning. You've taken enough from me, but you're not taking my future. Not anymore." I walked out of the dining room, leaving them both in stunned silence. For the first time, I felt powerful. They weren't in control anymore. I was. And deep down, I knew this was only my opening move. The real battle was still ahead. The night after the confrontation at the dinner table, the house was colder than ever. Daniel slept in the guest room, though I doubted he got much rest. I didn't sleep either. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything I had uncovered and everything that still needed to be done. I had exposed their secret, yes, but exposure wasn't enough. I had to make sure neither of them could hurt me again. I had to take back control of my life in every way possible, emotionally, financially, and legally. The next morning, Daniel tried to speak to me in the kitchen, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Anna, please, you have to believe me. It wasn't serious. It was a mistake, a mistake." The same words Sarah had used. I almost laughed at the predictability of it. Instead, I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "No, Daniel. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What you did was a choice. And you made it over and over again." He dropped his gaze, and in that moment, I knew he was already losing the fight. He thought he could smooth talk his way out of it, but he didn't realize I was already 10 steps ahead. That day, I went back to my lawyer. I brought everything, screenshots, receipts, recordings. She looked through them carefully, nodding with grim satisfaction. "This is strong," she said. "With this, we can prove infidelity beyond doubt. He won't stand a chance if he tries to fight you in court." Her words were both comforting and terrifying. Divorce wasn't just a possibility now, it was inevitable. My marriage was over. But strangely, the thought didn't break me. Instead, it strengthened me. The next step was Sarah. She still had the audacity to text me, as though we could just talk things out. I ignored her at first, but eventually I sent a single reply: "Stay away from me. Forever." But I knew Sarah too well to believe she would listen. She was arrogant, always convinced she could talk her way out of anything. She might try to worm her way back into my life, or worse, twist the story to make herself the victim. I couldn't let that happen. So I began building my plan, piece by piece. First, I quietly moved some of my money into a separate account that Daniel couldn't touch. I changed passwords, locked down my files, and secured every piece of evidence in a place he couldn't find. Second, I reached out to a close friend at work, someone I trusted with my life, and confided in her. Not the whole story, but enough. I told her that if anything happened to me, if Daniel or Sarah tried to spread lies, she needed to know the truth. Third, I started thinking about the house. It had been our dream home, the place we bought together, but now it felt poisoned. My lawyer explained that with the evidence of infidelity, I had a good chance of keeping it. And if I did, I was determined to strip every corner of it clean of their presence. But the final part of my plan came from a place of pure, cold clarity. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. I was going to ensure that both Daniel and Sarah paid for what they had done, not in screams or fights, but in silence, in the slow crumbling of the perfect little world they thought they had built. Daniel had his career, his reputation as a respectable architect. Sarah had her job at the hospital, her carefully cultivated image of being kind, selfless, trustworthy. What would happen if people knew the truth about them? What would happen if their colleagues, their friends, their families saw the evidence I had in my hands? I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge in the form of violence. All I needed was the truth. And the truth, once set free, had the power to destroy them more completely than I ever could. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers and evidence, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: strength. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. And for the first time, I knew I was going to win, because they had underestimated me. They thought I would break, that I would collapse under the weight of betrayal. But instead, they had awakened something inside me I didn't even know I had: the determination to rise from the ashes and reclaim my life. And soon, both Daniel and Sarah would see exactly what that looked like. By the time I had gathered all the pieces of my plan, I no longer felt like the broken woman who had first seen her husband's car outside that restaurant. I was sharper now, stronger. I had weapons in my hands: evidence, truth, and most importantly, the courage to use them. Daniel still tried to act as though things could be fixed. He brought me flowers one evening, cheap ones from a gas station, his eyes hopeful. "We can work through this, Anna," he said softly, as though a bouquet could erase months of betrayal. I looked at him, at the man I had once loved so deeply, and felt nothing but disgust. "No, Daniel," I replied. "You've already made your choice. Now it's my turn." The first strike landed with Sarah. I knew her reputation at the hospital was her pride. Everyone saw her as caring, trustworthy, reliable. But I also knew how fragile reputations could be. All it took was a whisper of truth to unravel the perfect mask she wore. I didn't have to make a scene. Instead, I sent an anonymous email to her supervisor, attaching a few of the hotel receipts with Daniel's name and hers together. I didn't even need to explain much. The implications were enough. Affairs with married men were frowned upon anywhere, but in a hospital where professionalism and ethics mattered, that was a stain Sarah couldn't wash away. Within a week, word spread quietly through her workplace. She tried to text me, angry and desperate, accusing me of ruining her life. I ignored every message. No, Sarah, you ruined your own life. I simply revealed the truth you worked so hard to hide. Then came Daniel. His career was built on trust, on reputation. Clients gave him projects worth millions because they believed he was steady, reliable, a man of integrity. But what happens when integrity is stripped away? At a dinner with his business partners, I made sure a carefully chosen folder slipped into the right hands. Inside were copies of those unsent love letters he had hidden in his drafts, hotel bookings paid with company credit cards, and receipts for expensive dinners labeled as client meetings. I didn't need to say a word. The documents spoke for themselves. By the end of the week, Daniel's boss called him in. He came home that night furious, slamming the door, accusing me of betrayal. "You're destroying me!" he shouted, his face twisted with rage. I stood calmly in the living room, arms crossed. "No, Daniel. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." The cracks in their perfect little illusion began to widen. Sarah lost shifts at the hospital, her colleagues whispering behind her back. Daniel faced suspension at work, pending an investigation into misuse of company funds. Their secret romance, once thrilling and exciting, now became a heavy chain dragging them both down. And the best part? I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to beg or cry. I simply let the truth breathe, and the truth was merciless. At night, when I lay in bed alone, I still felt the ache of betrayal. My heart still mourned the life I thought I had. But now, that pain was laced with something else. Satisfaction. I had been wronged, broken, humiliated. But I had risen, and they were finally paying the price. I wasn't done yet, though. Not until the divorce papers were signed. Not until I secured everything I needed to rebuild my life. But already, I could see the shift. Daniel and Sarah, once so smug and untouchable, were crumbling. And I, Anna, the woman they thought would break, was the one holding the pieces. The day of the divorce hearing arrived like a storm cloud that had been gathering on the horizon for months. I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer by my side, evidence neatly filed and ready. Daniel was already there, looking smaller somehow, diminished. His once confident posture had collapsed into a man weighed down by the wreckage of his own choices. Sarah wasn't there. She wasn't legally part of the case, but her shadow loomed over everything. I sat across from him, our eyes meeting briefly. For years, those eyes had been my comfort, the windows to a future I thought we shared. Now, all I saw was emptiness. Betrayal leaves scars you can't erase, but it also strips away illusions. I no longer saw the man I thought I loved. I saw the truth of who he had always been. The proceedings were swift. My lawyer laid out the evidence, the receipts, the emails, the recordings. Each piece landed like a blow, stripping Daniel of any chance to deny what he had done. He tried, of course. He muttered about mistakes, about confusion, about me being overly dramatic. But the judge didn't buy it. Neither did anyone else in that room. When the gavel finally fell, granting me the house and financial security, I felt a rush of relief so powerful, it almost knocked the breath from my lungs. The marriage was over. The nightmare was done. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of deception had been lifted. For the first time in a long time, the world felt open again, filled with possibilities instead of lies. Sarah tried to call me that night. I didn't answer. I let the phone ring until it went silent. She had already lost her job, her credibility, and the life she thought she could steal from me. That was enough. I didn't need to yell at her anymore. I didn't need to hear her excuses. She was nothing to me now. Daniel moved out within a week. I watched from the window as he loaded his things into the car. His shoulders slumped. There was no rage left in me, only indifference. The love I once had was gone, buried under too many lies. But life didn't end there. It began again. Slowly, painfully, but beautifully. I started redecorating the house, stripping away every reminder of the past. I filled the walls with colors that made me happy. planted flowers in the garden, and opened windows that had stayed closed for too long. I poured my energy back into my work, into friendships I had neglected while trying to hold my marriage together. And most importantly, I found myself again. For so long, I had been Anna the wife, Anna the friend, Anna the one who kept everyone else happy. Now I was just Anna. And that was enough. Betrayal changes you. It carves into your heart. It makes you doubt everything, even yourself. But it also teaches you strength you didn't know you had. It shows you who people truly are when the masks fall away. And sometimes it forces you to rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. So here I am, standing on the other side of the storm. I lost a husband. I lost a best friend. But what I gained was far greater: freedom, clarity, and the courage to never settle for less than I deserve. And to anyone listening to my story, I ask you this. What would you do if the two people you trusted most betrayed you? Would you crumble, or would you rise? Because I chose to rise, and I will never look back.